evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Cambridge Union Society. Tonight we are very lucky to be joined by Jerry Springer, a British-born American television presenter, best known, of course, as the frontman for the infamous talk show, The Jerry Springer Show, having begun his TV career as a news anchor. The Jerry Springer Show is now in its 21st year and is broadcast in over 50 countries and watched by millions. Jerry is also very interested in politics, as an active Democrat supporter, as well as a former mayor of Cincinnati. There will be an opportunity to ask questions after his talk, so do think of anything that you might like to say. And with no further ado, Jerry, thank you very much for coming.
May you never be on my show. First of all, it's an honor to be here, and Cambridge is so much better than Oxford. I just was hoping to get one applause tonight. Okay, yeah, thanks for having me, and it must have been in a drunken fit of madness that you decided to invite me, but God bless you. I, as you know, do this stupid show, and we've been doing it for 21 years now. And we do 200 shows a year, so you figure 21 years, it's a little over 4,000 shows. If you figure at least 10 guests a show, we've had over 40,000 people on that show. That is not what America is. Okay, I'm kidding, it is. Actually, that's an important, maybe this is the place to start off talking about it, because there is a perception in watching the show, particularly in the beginning when there was such criticism about it, that this is giving America a bad name, what's wrong with these Americans, they're all crazy, etc. And I would argue, as crazy and as stupid as the show is, and I fully admit that, it's a circus. What the show is, I think the criticism against it is highly elitist. And what I mean by that is the complaints against it are that, and you can see it, reporters write the words, these people are, quote, trash, as if human beings can be trash. I mean, Hitler was trash, but otherwise human beings aren't trash. Some are wealthy than others, some are better educated than others, some have better luck in gene pool, but these are people that maybe they didn't go to the best school, and they don't speak the best English, they don't speak Queen's English, but they are like everybody else, and I mean everybody else. We are catching them in the show in a moment in their life that perhaps they didn't behave properly, but certainly we can't judge people based on what you might do in a particular moment in your life, otherwise, no one would pass muster. The issue is that we are all alike, and some of us just dress better. And what I mean by that is I have never met a human being that couldn't have been on my show. Ever. Now, 95% of us would never go on the show, myself included, because you don't want to share this with the rest of the world. So that's what's unique, that these people are willing to talk about their momentary lapses in judgment. And they're willing to be on national television and talk about it. But the idea that somehow wealthy people have cornered the market on morality or virtue is an absurdity. Open any newspaper in any city, whether it's America, Great Britain, any newspaper in the world, basically. And by the time you get to page 3, I've got 20 shows. So, and we are filled with famous people doing all the kinds of things that you actually see the people on our show have done. So this feeling of superiority by watching the show, it shouldn't be there, because it's disingenuous. What is also significant, I think, is that the reason there was such shock value when the show first came out, now the show's been on 21 years, which means the show has been on your entire life for most of you. And I apologize. I just hope You can't be a grown-up in today's world and honestly be shocked by anything you've ever seen on my show. There is no event, nothing that has happened that you didn't know or you don't know already that these kind of things happen. And think of the world we have lived in my lifetime, gone through Holocaust, assassination, world wars, all kinds of crimes, 9/11, you name it. So what is shocking anymore? But we hadn't seen that on television. And I believe, certainly in America, and maybe you can say the same thing here in Great Britain, for years, American television only represented one part of society, upper middle class white people. If you were African American or some other minority, you were on one of the side networks. Or if you were African American, you had to be a doctor living in the suburbs like Cosby, which was a popular show in America. You have it here? So all American television was suburban, wealthy, or upper middle class white people. And even if you look at the popular shows, whether it was Friends, Frasier, Seinfeld, any of these shows, everyone is so well scrubbed. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with the upper middle class perspective, white perspective. That's certainly the one I was raised in. But it shouldn't be the only one. In a free society, a free media, television, for example, ought to represent all elements of society. So, yes, we have a whole lot of shows where you've got rich white people. But how about some shows that represent other people that happen to live in our country, that are just as real and want to be as happy just like everyone else does? They get angry when their things don't go well. They scream, they cry. As I said, they don't use the best language. But their emotions are every emotion that everyone else has. So that's what was shocking by such a show on television. Now, I do believe we have a class warfare going on in America now, perhaps for the first time. When I started doing the show, people would say, because I always come to England, and they would always say, "Oh, you Americans, So I did our show about 8-9 years ago in London for several weeks, using British guests, British audience. They say, "Oh no, we don't behave like that." I gotta tell you, it was great. It was exactly like we do in America, only the accent was different. But when I say if you had to find a difference between Great Britain and America, which I don't find very many differences, frankly, other than the accent, is that probably, innately, you give more credence to class distinction. I mean, even the form of the government, you have the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And in America, at least the value, even though it's obviously not practiced all the time, and now less and less, but at least the concept of America is that what you are at birth is irrelevant. And the idea is, and I'm an immigrant, so I have lived it, I'm living proof of it, is that it doesn't matter what your circumstance of birth is. It used to be race made a difference, now it's making less of a difference. But other than that issue, it doesn't matter where you came from, who your parents were, everyone has a shot at making it in America. And I think one of the reasons there was such an emotional outpouring around the world when Barack Obama was elected was because somewhere deep inside, there was just this feeling, damn it, yeah, America is like that. You can be poor from a single mom and, totally unknown, and just by your own merits and own hard work, you can get, to the top of president of the United States. So that I think is what America likes to think of itself, that we don't have class distinction. I now have to say, sadly, which is what I say as I travel around America, is that we are having a class war in our country. And it is not a declared war. It's not like a bunch of rich people got around and said, let's get the middle class, let's get those poor people. But the class war is an unintended consequence of the fact that middle and lower income people aren't on the radar screen. They're not even part of the conversation. And we are facing that issue right now. Maybe you've heard of the 99 percenters. The idea that the richest 1% of America is doing great. And because of my stupid show, I've been lucky. But then the government comes and says they want to lower my taxes. What? Why are you giving me a tax break? When we can buy another car? It's crazy. When in fact, middle-income people in our country now are facing a greater problem being able to afford not just health care, which you're able to do here in this country, but we don't have national health insurance. It's now just got passed, and hopefully by 2014 it will be in effect. But we have battled to try to get health insurance. So middle-income people, 40 million of them, couldn't afford health insurance. We can't afford to send our kids to college because it's so expensive. And all of a sudden, if you can't send your kids to college, if you don't have the education, then you don't have the ladder to live the American dream of being born of no particular wealth and all of a sudden being able to get to wherever you want in life. So the class distinctions in America are now becoming real, and it is against what we're supposed to be about. And we're seeing it in this election right now. I don't know how closely you've been following. My guess is Barack Obama will be reelected. But there is a civil war going on within the Republican Party. And the fellow who seems to be the one that will get the nomination, Romney, represents what is the establishment wing of the Republican Party, which are wealthy businessmen, wealthy conservatives. But there's a civil war going on in that party now because there's another wing of the party, which is the cultural conservatives. And these cultural wars all of a sudden have come to the forefront, though it could well be argued that what has that got to do with the President of the United States is. But people now are arguing, as I saw it 2 days ago flying over here in the newspaper, on cultural issues you're arguing about as well too. Though you're probably a little more liberal to my liking than the feeling of that's going on in America regarding gay rights, abortion, the church's involvement in politics and government. And so America now all of a sudden is losing some of this separation of church and state. We're losing some of this where society, where class distinctions are not made. Everyone has a chance of making it. And I think that is dangerous for our country. Hopefully we'll win the battle and stop this from happening. I can never understand why we have this cultural war going on, for example, on gay rights and the right for gays to be married. If you don't like gays, don't date them. Why should I care if two guys living down the block want to marry each other? How does that affect my marriage? I mean, I don't get it at all. But let's say you have a belief that you think God would be very angry with this. Or you have a belief that with your church, that you're a very solid member of your church and your church is opposed to it. Well, fine. No one is telling you that you can't do what your church says. Don't marry someone of the same gender then. Why does it become a cardinal or an archbishop's business to tell the government whether or not the state will recognize it as a marriage? It's the state's business. And those religions that are opposed to it won't sanctify that marriage. So if you are a devout member of that church, then number one, you probably won't marry someone of the same gender. And if you did get married to someone, you would know ahead of time that the church, you can't get married in the church. They won't bless it. That's fine. The church should have total authority among its parishioners about their religious beliefs. But not what the government does. So there's that issue. In America, we're fighting now another cultural issue. This whole concept of, birth control suddenly, which is embarrassing. But apparently under the new health insurance law, various institutions, including those that are sponsored by a church, for example, would be required in the health insurance. The health insurance would have to provide free contraception. And honestly, one of the candidates came out against it, Rick Santorum, who was running on the Republican side. And he doesn't believe in it. And really? 95% of Catholic women at the appropriate age use birth control. So it's not even, and the members of the church don't want to do it. You know what? If you don't want to use birth control, don't. You know? But why should we get involved in a law that says someone else can? And the same people that will turn around and then say they're opposed to abortion, which I get. But if you're opposed to abortion, don't have one. But if you're worried about too many abortions taking place in society, wouldn't you want to have birth control? It seems to me that very few times does someone get an abortion when they want to have the child. It just seems to be a bad strategy. So we have these issues, and I think the cultural wars are being fought because maybe people are losing control of other things in their lives that the government is doing they don't like. They say, well, we can't control the economy. Let's make sure we have a government that is on our side on this particular issue. And I just think that's dangerous. One of the things we treasure in America is the separation of church and state, so that, it's not because we don't like religion. People in America tend to be, as a whole, much more religious than people in Great Britain or much of Europe. And so they're much more active churchgoers, etc., or temple-goers, whatever your religion is. But the reason we so love the separation of church and state is so that we can practice our own religion without the interference of the state. I don't want my ability to practice my religion to be at the mercy that, gee, I hope a majority of the people will let me do what I want to do with my religion. I mean, if we start to let churches or temples tell the government what the rules should be, you know, what, for example, if most of the people in America were Jewish? Could we pass a law that says there'll be no driving on Saturdays? You know, wouldn't you go nuts? Well, not in London, it'd probably be a good thing. Yeah. So, that needs to be awfully clear that, and I guess I speak to you about it, though I expect I'm speaking somewhat to the choir here. One, because you deal with this issue much better here in Great Britain on that particular issue. The cultural wars, you kind of put those aside, at least the majority of the people that. But I think it's awfully important to stand tall on it, to not give in to it. And you're doing it because you want people to have the right to practice their religions, not because you're anti-religion. That's the point. Don't let yourself be put into the corner of saying, oh, you know, you want a state that doesn't have any relationship with God. If people want to have a relationship with God, as many of us do, just create the environment that anybody can pray as they wish. One other thing, and then I'll take questions. I believe in the end, liberalism wins. I know a lot of people like to say they're conservative. Somehow you seem like more of a grown-up if you say I'm conservative. You're responsible with your money. You have an equal voice. You wear a three-piece suit. and you have a conservative prime minister. Even though on more than a few occasions we vote for conservatives, or the public votes for conservatives in America and in Great Britain, I don't care what speeches you give and what you say, I am telling you that 95% of you live your life as liberals. Give every conservative speech you want. Vote for conservative. Do whatever you want to do. You're a liberal. And you're a liberal because I see how you live. And it's inevitable. The progression of humanity is we become more liberalized. We want to. 21 years ago when I started my show, we did a show on interracial dating, and I swear to you, we had protesters outside the studio. Because it was on interracial dating. We now have a president who is the product of an interracial marriage. Society has become more liberal. Society is certainly becoming more liberal on gay marriage. I mean, honestly, 10 years ago, it was unthinkable. We were talking about that gay should have rights. Now we're talking about not just unions, but the actual marriage. You take a look at the music you listen to, your living habits, the movies you like, the way your dating habits, maybe one or two of you that smoke weed. 3. And so you have, so who are we kidding? And we have become, and even on the issues such as abortion rights, all these cultural issues, we're going to the most conservative neighborhood you can find in Great Britain. I'm telling you, if you talk to the people your age and see how they're living, what's conservative about the way they live? Now they say, well, I don't like giving away a lot of my money in taxes. Well, everyone would like to keep their money. Okay, so yeah, sure you like that money. But in the end, your heart and your lifestyle and what you really believe. Let me talk one more minute on the issue of abortion and then we'll open it up to whatever you want to talk about. To show the liberalism. We have to debate in America on when life begins. Well, life begins at conception. That's scientific. I didn't say a human being, I said life begins at conception. As soon as you have it, you have a living organism. That's a scientific question. So I don't know why we keep debating that. The real debate is when does a human being begin? And that, I would argue, is based on your philosophy, your religion, your beliefs, your belief system, your values. We each individually decide when is really a human being. And I would argue that even the person who is absolutely right to life, even that person honestly makes a distinction between a fetus and a person who has already been born. Let me give you the example. If you heard that 3 doors down from where you live, a 3-year-old girl was stabbed to death by an intruder while she was sleeping, you would have no problem saying that person should spend the rest of his or her life in jail. No problem. I'm assuming they're not insane, but I mean, they should spend. And in America, if you believe in the death penalty, you need to say death. Now, across the street is a 16-year-old girl who's a friend of yours. And well, you know her since she was 16. Or you know her now, but she tells you that when she was 16, one night you guys are out having a drink together, you're just talking. She's a little bit somber. Why are you somber? Well, 3 years ago on this day was when I had an abortion. Who believes that girl should spend the rest of her life in jail? Who believes that girl, let's say America, should get the death penalty? And of course, 99% of rational people say, well, no, she should spend the rest of her life in jail. I don't think she despite the fact that we're always arguing, we kind of know that there is a difference between someone who is already born and someone who is still a fetus. Now, you may decide, based on your personal beliefs, that all the way through, it's a potential life you don't want to take. It's a potential human being you don't want to take. And that's great. But you can understand why there's a philosophical question as to when a human being exists. Because every single one of us makes the distinction somewhere along that first moment of conception to the age of 3, let's say. Every single one of us makes a distinction on how much of a human being that person is. And most of us, all of us agree, once the child is born, that's a human being. No question there. It's murder. Right before, the differences of opinion, and that's philosophical. It's not scientific, it's philosophical. And I think if we can get away from all the labeling and name-calling and like we're going to be judged by God, by what we say to others about how they deal with this issue, I think we have to be so much less judgmental in our society, in both societies. Okay, any questions, comments, tickets to the show? You stand up just so I can hear you. Oh, you got it. Okay.
My name is
Is that all right? You just wanted to hold something.
I'm a twins coach. My name is Charlie Robert. And I'm just going to say that you yourself mentioned that in society today, there is an undeniable aggression towards liberty. Then if we look at the situation in the Middle East, specifically Egypt, where Muslim groups and sects pressing for an increase in conservatism in society. How can you then reconcile the two?
Okay. Because it takes place in stages. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes place over years. In the American Revolution, 100 years later, before slavery was abolished. Another 100 years before we started to say that separate but equal was no longer tenable. So it takes time. The first is we don't want the government to tell us what to do. So we have the Arab Spring. Now, just because you give people the right to vote or to have their say doesn't mean that people are always going to make nice, good decisions. So I think there's a period of learning and education and a lot of bumps along the way and a lot of killings along the way. It's not smooth. But inevitably, 100 years from now, the world will be much more liberal than it is today, just as we are much more liberal than we were 100 years ago. Just even with your own parents. You talk to them about what it was like when they were kids. They say, God, we never would do such things. Now, one of the reasons it's happening so quickly now is because of technology. Technology and the speed of it has increased this race to liberalism. Think about it. About the time, you went there, but in 1989, communism fell within months. I mean, here you have the Cold War going on for 50-odd years, ready to blow up the world, and suddenly, without a war, without a hot war, within several months, because of technology, Poland fell, Czechoslovakia fell, Soviet Union fell. And there went communism, just like that, because everyone had cell phones or the internet, and they could communicate. All of a sudden, you saw instantly what people in another country were doing, and you arranged to have a meeting. Let's meet there, let's do that, let's have that demonstration, and everyone caught on, and that's exactly what's happening now. I'm here to tell you that Barack Obama States if we didn't have cell phones. And the reality of it is, because in order to be elected, in American politics, you have to be wealthy to be elected. Or you have to have wealthy people contribute money. Because in America, we advertise on television during the campaigns, and it's all individually raised. And so the reason we have a government right now that is passing laws to benefit wealthy people is because the only people who get into office are either very rich themselves or they've got wealthy contributors. So once they get in office, they pass all the laws that benefit wealthy people. Now, to run for office, you need all this money. So the political parties, traditionally, have been the organ by which you could raise a lot of money and they give it to their candidate. The political leadership would never have taken a freshman senator, African-American, and assumed that he could be elected president of the United States. It never, ever would have happened. But what happened was everyone had cell phones. And he was smart enough to figure out that he didn't need a political party, that he could challenge the institutional leadership that was back in Hillary. And he would raise money and get organization by texting everyone. And he raised way more money than the Democratic Party, just by everybody sending him their $10, $20, $30. And all of a sudden, he out-organized the party, he outraised the party, and suddenly Barack Obama is president of the United States. Totally transformed. Because all of a sudden, people felt empowered. You didn't have to go through the big wigs. And that is what is happening around the world. As we have this technology now, you're able to have an Arab Spring. Because everyone's communicating. It's more than a coincidence that just in the last couple of years, which is what I have on my mind, Osama bin Laden, Gaddafi, Hussein, all these people are getting knocked off. I'm telling you, their time, and now before long it'll be Assad in Syria. Their time is, imagine if you're Assad, do you honestly think that he's thinking about, boy, 10 years from now, I may think about retiring. He's not going to. They're done. They're just biding time. People don't want to be told anymore what to do by someone else. All institutions are being threatened. Good institutions, by the way, as well as bad ones. So it's the masses now control. They've even taken charge of our entertainment. They've taken charge of our culture. Why do you think we have reality television now? Why do you think the popular show are all the shows that regular people can be on? You don't have to be a professional. You can go on the X Factor or Britain's Got Talent or whatever the shows are here. It's regular people, and it's regular people who vote. They've taken over television. You've got reality shows now in America, I don't know how many of you have here, where people that are totally unknown, they have their own reality shows. Where did the Kardashians come from? And so we are seeing the democratization of entertainment. We, the people, have become our own entertainment. And it all came about because technology made it possible. And so I think, the Arab Spring didn't overnight become a democracy where other people get freedom. Remember, people first want to be free themselves. It's the next step to start saying, hey, let someone else be free. So the first step was, good, we don't have the government telling us what to do. Now we can have our own religions. At some point, someone within the religion is going to say, hey, wait a second. We didn't want the government telling us what to do. Well, we don't want the leaders of our religious faith telling us what to do either. Which is why, certainly in America, and maybe here in Great Britain, you would know better than I, but all institutions are losing their clout. It's that someone will say, for example, I'm a member of this church, but no, I don't go every Sunday, or I don't follow all the rules. Yeah, I do use birth control. Yeah, as a Jew, I can tell you I once had bacon. So that's why. It's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's taking time. But it's happening. Liberals will ultimately win simply because it's human instinct. None of us like to be told what to do. why in the end we always win. Yeah.
I wanted to ask why your show transformed from a political show into what it is now, because you keep calling it your stupid show, but you can't genuinely think it's stupid or you wouldn't have done it.
You don't know me. Yeah, I do think it's stupid. It's fun. I enjoy it. How the show transformed, I'd spent 10 years being city councilman and mayor of Cincinnati, and then I was 10 years, I was hired immediately after the mayoralty to be the news anchor for the NBC affiliate in Cincinnati. So every night I would broadcast the news at 5:30, 6, and 11. We did that for 10 years. I did that for 10 years. And we were very dominant in the ratings. So the company that owned us, owned the station, also owned talk shows. In America, there were talk shows like Phil Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael. I have no idea who these people are. There were a bunch of talk shows. Well, this guy Phil Donahue, who had a dominant talk show, he was getting close to retirement. So one day, the CEO of the company took me to lunch and said, "Jerry, we're starting a new talk show. You're going to host it." So I was assigned to it. I was an employee. I had no interest in doing talk shows. I enjoyed doing the news. And I could do a political commentary at the end of every newscast. So I really enjoyed that. But I'm an employee, and they said, "Well, we'll let you do both." And they fixed the salary and all that. So I would get up in the morning, fly to Chicago, do the show, and then in the afternoon fly back to Cincinnati and do the news. And I did that 5 days a week. I did that for about 2 years, and then it got too much. So I decided, well, I'll stick with the show. And now the show is really catching on. It was a serious talk show in the beginning, boring but serious. And the only decision I ever made, I never made the decision to go crazy. I just made the decision to go young. At the time, there were about 20 other talk shows on television, and all of them were appealing or going after the demographic, which at that time was called middle-aged housewives. Today it's politically incorrect, but back then that's what they were called. And every talk show was going after women who were at home during the middle of the day. Along came Ricky Lake, and she was the first talk show. I don't know if you ever got it here. You did. Ricky Lake was really the first talk show ever to go after young people. When I mean young people, I mean high school and college period. And it just struck me as a business model. Why are we trying to be 1 out of 20 shows going after Oprah's audience? Let's be 1 out of 2 and go after Ricky's audience, and we'll get a large piece of the pie, a lot of viewers. And that's exactly what we did. So we said, from now on, only young people in the audience, young people on stage, young subject matter. Well, I don't have to tell you, young people are crazy. You're much more open about your lives, much more experimental, much more, you're wild. And then the show started from time to time to be crazy, just because it's like a fraternity party. Guys get out of hand. Then NBC Universal bought us and said, from now on, you can only be crazy. So under contract, no, this is true. If you called us with a warm, uplifting story, we are obliged to send you to another show. And they give us a list of the shows to send you to. But we're not allowed to run it. So it's not even a debate. Well, let's do this, I may want to do a political show, which is my interest. I'm not allowed to do that. It's a show about the only people that can go on the show. The 2 requirements are, well, 3. 1, you have to call us. We can't try to put you on the show. We can go on the show. So you have to call us. Secondly, the story has to be truthful. And third, it has to be either inappropriate or out of the ordinary. And those are the only shows we're allowed to do. So I go in every day knowing that they're going to hand me something that's inappropriate. If I were a judge in a criminal court building, I would know that every day they're bringing me criminals. I wouldn't say, I'm not going to be a judge because I got all these criminals I got to deal with. Well, if I'm hired to host a show about inappropriate behavior, just like when I was doing the news, I didn't say when I was doing the news, if it's a story about violence or murder or whatever, I don't want to report it. So it has nothing to do with what my interest is. I always tell people, I don't watch the show. But in fairness, I'm 68 years old. When I was your age, if I were in college, I'd be watching, just because I know what I was like. And it's a hoot. It's an escape. facilities for an hour. It's not anything I take seriously. It's not, no one ever watches our show and says, gee, when I grow up, I want to be just like that. So the idea that we're a negative influence on society is absurd. We're just the opposite. I would argue that when you go to see a movie where heroes have all the guns and the violence and all that, and we get excited about them because they're drop dead gorgeous and they're shooting people and they're doing all this stuff, they become heroes. That could have an influence on a young person a lot more than anyone who has ever been on our show. Except the one guy who married his horse. Yes?
You briefly touched on the death penalty in America, and I wondered if you could expand on that. Do you think there is any future for it? Do you think...
In the death penalty?
Yeah, abolished in your lifetime in America?
There are a bunch of states that it is abolished in. I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it because one, I think life is precious, and I don't think other human beings are. The only excuse ever for taking someone's life is self-defense. Right? Someone's after you protect yourself and your family. I get that. But the death penalty is never self-defense. The crime has already been committed, and the person is now in prison. So, nor do I believe the death penalty is a deterrent. People that commit murder are either drunk, on drugs, in a blind rage, or hired hitmen. None of those are conditions whereby the person thinks about consequences. So therefore, it can't be a deterrent. So therefore, the only thing is, it gives us a sense of vengeance. Now, if you're asking me what my person, people then say, well, if someone went after someone in your family or whatever and killed them, would you want to kill them? Yes, I would want to kill them. But my personal emotion cannot be the basis of state policy. The state has to be able to step away from the emotion and create a rational justification for what it does. And I think a state that says, we so value life that we won't take another, even a heinous person, we'll keep him in jail forever. I'm not saying be nice to this person. I'm not saying give him a great life and let him watch my show. But, no, I just don't think we should execute it. Yeah.
I'm John Brown from Queen's College. You talked about abortion. Thanks. You talked about abortion, and you were saying how there's a distinction between the start of life and the start of life and life becoming a human being. And you used the example of someone becoming a toddler and a person having an abortion. But I was just wondering that for me, a much more sort of sensible distinction would be maybe someone stabbing a toddler and someone punching a pregnant woman in the stomach, which I think both reprehensible acts and both deserve to be life imprisonment. And maybe a mother who has an abortion and a mother who smothers her baby after it's been born. I think that distinction there is more about how much blame you attach because of the person's motive, rather than whether or not there's a distinction between a fetus and a post-born baby. Because personally, I sort of don't. My philosophy is that life begins at birth, humanity begins at birth. But so from that perspective, that's how I would see that distinction not really working.
Well, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding, I think you're agreeing with me. First of all, you're giving your philosophical, which is the point I'm making. You have a right to make that philosophical distinction. The state doesn't have a right to tell you what you should believe on that issue. I'm just guessing that you don't believe that a young girl who has an abortion should spend the rest of her life in prison. I just don't think you really believe that. And if it were your daughter one day, and she came to you and said what had happened, you would not suggest she spent her life in prison. And I just think that's the honest answer. The only point I'm making is, I I use that as an example of how we all recognize that there is a scale of when you become a human being. And the morning after pill is not the same as stabbing a 3-year-old to death. And most of us agree with that it's not the same. And therefore, as soon as you agree that it's not the same, then you're admitting that you're using a different value system for a human being than you do at the moment of conception. And if you are, then you have to agree that it's a personal decision and not the state's. Because you're making your decision. You're using your value system, your opinion. And that's what I think we get lost in this whole argument. When does life begin? That's not the issue. Just forget it. Life begins at conception. We know that. The rest is personal, religious, independent judgments. Yeah.
You know some of the most bizarre people
Some of the most bizarre people? The fifth one we had on and the 246th. No, they don't get on. They're bizarre. The guy who married his horse. I keep referring to that because that kind of, I tell you what was weird. Well, many things were weird about it. Okay, so it was funny because we had a couple of shows in a row where there was a lot of fighting. And so I come out to start the show and I say, today we've had so much fighting recently, I'm going to tone things down. Most people in the audience were pissed off because they come to the show and see fighting. And I said, so today we have a love story. We don't go and here's Bob. And Bob is sitting on the stage. And I say, Bob, what's going on? He said, well, Jerry, nothing much except the neighbors that are complaining about my wife. Well, what's wrong with her? Well, she's quiet, she keeps to herself. She doesn't yell or anything like that. All right, let's meet Pixel. And out comes this horse. The crowd goes crazy. Now here's the funny part of the story. I'm never allowed to know what the show is about. So, in other words, they hand me a card, and the card has the names of the guests. So I saw the name Pixel. Well, we've had crazier names than that. But I'm not allowed to know the subject, because I'm supposed to ask questions that you would ask sitting at home watching, and then make jokes. So when Pixel comes out, I'm first thinking, she's supposed to be riding Pixel. It doesn't dawn on me that Pixel's the wife. Now, then it becomes clear. Here's what was weird. Bob is sitting here. I'm standing here on stage, and here's Pixel. Every time I got in the line of sight between Bob and Pixel would nudge me out of the way. I mean, it was weird. Here's what's great about my job. I don't care how you make your living in life. But when you come home at the end of the day and your significant other says, hi dear, what happened today? Interesting day at work. No one ever beats my story. You're working at the law firm, you're working at some business, you're working at the bank. Well, the boss said today, wow, is that crazy? And I got a story that's going to knock you out. That probably wasn't crazy. Oh, there was one other. We did a secret crush show. And, this guy was on the show, that's right. He cut off, it hurts just to say it, but he cut off his own penis because this gay guy was stalking him. And he thought that the gay guy would lose interest in him. And I'm thinking, why didn't you just change your phone number? Plus, we had the police report, the hospital report, and producers went backstage to look at it. Here's, and then I'll get on to that. This is what amazed me. When he said what he did, everyone goes, and then at one point in the show, I asked, well, what did you do with it? He said, I flushed it down the toilet. Right. The audience went crazy when he said that. Like, that's what was absurd. Really? You flushed it down the toilet. What?
So it's not obvious from your views that you were quite liberal. Question I have, with regards to Jerry Springer Show itself,
Yes.
the popularity of it is very much powered by prejudice, class dividing, things like that. So my question is two parts. One, basically, do you think that shows that yours actually perpetuate this divide? And two, with regards to your personal liberal views, how do you reconcile that with how you might come across to the average viewer that might not sort of
Okay, a fair question, and the answer is, I think watching our show ultimately, you become far less judgmental. First of all, initially, you become, and I gave the example of the interracial dating. What people accept today, it is, you come on the show and say, hey, I'm gay, and continue the story. It's not even an issue anymore. The more we see the people like this, and the more we suddenly see, you know what? I've got someone in my family. Again, you may think that your language is better, but if someone comes out and say, hey, there's been some cheating going on, or this, after a while, you start thinking about it, there's someone in my family that did this, or we got a couple. Everyone here has a story of something you have done in your life or someone in your family. I'm not saying it's scandalous. I'm saying if the rest of the country knew about it, they'd be scratching their head. We all have stories somewhere in our lives or in our family's life that are a little bit different. I think that's what you take away from it. I don't sense at all that the audience is becoming judgmental about these people today at all. Is there still elitism in our country or in the world? Yes. But here's what's neat. Every day, it's someone else from a different group. Because everyone always thinks it's not in their neighborhood. Well, all these people come from the South. Oh, all these people come from the inner city. Oh, all these people are gay. All these people are whatever it is. In other words, it's every group has been represented on our show. I mean, every group. And we suddenly realize that people have all kinds of issues in their lives, regardless of the color of their skin, their gender, their geographic place. So, no, I would argue that a conservative would never do my show. I have no problem about it. I have never run away from the show. I never, ever said, I'm not going to do this kind of show because it's going to make me look bad. I'll be honest with you. You make a lot more money having a cleaner show. Flat out. When you do a show like mine, it's hard getting sponsors. They don't put you on at the right time periods because they worry about it. There is no economic advantage to doing my kind of a show. And I never would have thought to do it. And as I keep saying, I'm not interested in watching it. But there is a part of me that would never give in at the time when there was pressure because that's what always happens. Oh, we don't want these people on television. Why not? You get famous celebrities, gorgeous looking people going on late night television, writing books about who they slept with, or what's going on, and we can't buy enough of their books or watch them enough, and we cheer them when they walk on stage. All this stuff. It is so hypocritical. And just because the people on my show don't have a lot of money, or don't speak well, or look great, according to our standards of what looking great means, we suddenly berate them. I don't think the public's berating them. I think the critics are. Because obviously people keep watching the show. That would be my answer. But no, I have no qualms about doing the show. I admit it's stupid. But God bless a country that can have this show on, and that we're not just putting everyone clean scrub, because that's not how the real world is. This is reality, I think. Yeah.
So, you mentioned how people with poor families or less educated families have difficulty trying to socialize and getting into university. So, what's your opinion on affirmative action?
I've always been for it. The reason I've been for affirmative action is there is no way that I am, when I was younger, forget me, there is no way that you are competing with someone living in the inner city that has, let's say, a family of total poverty, no one, maybe just one parent, no one went to school, there are no books at home, there's no reading going on, there's no, strong structure at home to give the child a sense of love and a basis to have self-confidence, self-esteem. None of that. Someone living in it, you all have been blessed with great brains, reasonably good health, probably most of you from good homes, etc. You're not competing with that kid. It's not even close. So what affirmative action does is I don't mind having a competitive race, but we should all start at the same starting line. And if you don't have affirmative action, and you say, well, let everyone compete, well, that's unfair, because you're starting so far ahead of, and if we don't help this person get to the starting line, which means early childhood education, decent nutrition, counsel, and all the things. Great elementary school education. A lot of kids in America, in some of these neighborhoods, they show up in first grade. They don't even know the names of their parents. They don't know their address. They're just basic things that you don't even think about because your mom and dad were dealing with that, from birth. So yes, I'm very much for affirmative action, and I think it's done a lot of good. And what's so hypocritical is a lot of the politicians that argue against it don't realize how many people are today, how many kids are now growing up in a family where someone is now having a job that maybe couldn't get the job because of their color of their skin before. And now, oh my gosh, my dad's a lawyer. My dad's, my dad's a teacher, mom's is a teacher, whatever it is. So, yeah, affirmative action has done great good in America. So I'm very pleased that we have it. Final couple of questions. You've got someplace to go, do you?
You mentioned class warfare, and I was wondering if you could expand on that, especially sort of with the civil war that you mentioned within the Republican Party, because surely with the division there and sort of the choice that they have to make is going to exclude a part of that group and maybe continue this class warfare. What are the repercussions, or do you think?
The repercussions of the class warfare, I believe, which is not a bad repercussion from my point of view, is Obama will be reelected. And there is a movement now called the 99%ers in America. I think I should wear that. And I think the single biggest thing that has to happen, and it's kind of technical, but bear with me just for a second. I told you that in order to get elected in America, you really have to have some money. There are exceptions. We generally have to have money because it's so expensive to buy the TV commercials. And Romney is spending 5 times as much money as Santorum is within the Republican primaries. 5 times as much, and they're coming out about even. But Romney wins. And he wins because if he got that much money. The Supreme Court made the decision last year in the United case, whereby corporations can now give as much money as they want, and you can have political action committees, independent groups, where you can contribute as much as you want, there are no limits, and you don't even have to give your name, they don't have to list the name. So a few wealthy people, like this one guy in Nevada who was given to Santorum $5 million, one person, and now he's going to give another 5, he said. But not to Santorum, to Gingrich. So it's all this money stuff. And so the people that get into government are people that represent wealthy interests, and so all the laws that are passed help the wealthy. That is why we have the class warfare now happening. It's not that the rich people are breaking the law. No, just the opposite. They're following the law, but the law is such that people like me can write things off. People like me can get tax breaks that a middle-income person can't. We have a payroll tax in America that helps fund Social Security. You pay a certain percentage of your salary to this payroll tax up to $104,000 a year. Anything you make, if you're lucky enough to make over $104,000, you don't have to pay a penny payroll tax on. So a person that makes $10 million a year pays no more payroll tax than the person that makes $100,000 a year. That's fair. See, it's the law is written to help wealthy people. And the only way that's going to change, I think, is ultimately the Supreme Court either has to reverse itself or we have to get, because a lot of the Supreme Court justices now are very elderly and will either retire or pass on, whatever. So there will be changes, probably within the next 4 years with retirement. The president gets to appoint those. So it may be the single most important reason, in my point of view, that Obama gets reelected. Just because the Supreme Court then will, and it'll be much better on women's issues, it'll be much better on civil rights, it'll be much better on the class warfare kind of thing. Again, let me say, because everyone gets excited when you say class warfare. No, I don't believe rich people are trying to stick it to middle and low income people. Rich people are not evil as a class. They're not. They're just not thinking about how we can help middle and lower income people. And they pass laws that help themselves. And that's why the middle class is getting screwed. I tell you what, let's take 3 more questions. And I'm going to let you, so that you'll be the bad guy, you determine which.
Oh no.
Oh no.
You mentioned earlier on the difference in the rift in the Republican Party between...
Are you American?
Yeah, I'm from New York.
Yeah, I do.
Good. But my question was about the increasing globalization in the U.S. And
yes.
You spoke to that end. And I agree that as a whole we are transitioning more towards the ideological spectrum. But surely you could acknowledge the difference between liberal social values and fiscal conservatism, for instance, and even in the Republican Party, for instance, where there's that divide. So as a society, even if we're tending towards the liberal end of the spectrum socially, we could still maintain fiscal conservatism.
Okay, well, I would argue, and this is my partisanship. Understand, I'm a partisan, so everything has to be taken with a grain of salt in terms of what I'm saying. I would argue that this fiscal conservatism is just putting a nice name on, gee, I want to keep my own money. Make as much as I can and keep as much of it as I can. And if they ran on that platform, they would not win the election, obviously, because most people are not rich. So in order to make it something that everyone can get around, is they spread this fiction of, if we have fiscal conservatism, if we lower the taxes on wealthy people and businesses, they will hire more people. And I am saying that is absolutely untrue. And you don't have to believe me. Just look at what happened. We have had the Bush tax cuts since 2003, and unemployment has gone up and up and up. When you give tax breaks to business, they don't, in most cases, hire more people. Not because they're evil, not because they're bad. The whole concept of our system, the whole concept of capitalism, which I love, it's given me this great life. Believe me, I love capitalism. But the whole concept of capitalism is to make a profit. The theory being that if you can make a profit at what you do, you will work harder so you can make more and provide for yourself and your family. If everyone's working harder and creating more things, that makes a better society as a whole, which is, by the way, why communism ultimately failed as a philosophy. It fails because no one gives a damn about the work they do because they don't get to keep the rewards. So capitalism is based on the human instinct of wanting to provide for yourself and your family, to make a profit. Well, with the technology that has all of a sudden so escalated and at such a faster pace, the result is now, if every single business that exists to make a profit, and the way you increase the size of your profit is to reduce expenses, therefore, every single business that exists, including you when you hire someone, let's say, to do your lawn, everyone tries to hire as few people as possible at as low a price as possible. And if you have to hire a person, you will, wherever possible, have a computer or some technology to replace the person. It's cheaper. And if you have to hire a person, you will try to hire someone overseas because that's cheaper. So the whole incentive that we built in, because everyone wants to look at the profit and loss statement of the company they're investing in, is hire as few people as possible. No business goes around and say, you know, we don't really need you, but I know you need a job. Why don't you come by it? No. If you have a nice house with a big lawn, big backyard, whatever, you need someone to mow it. If 4 kids come with a push mower, you can hire them. Well, this one guy comes and he has a riding mower. You're going to hire the one guy because he'll do it faster and you have to pay him less. You only pay one guy rather than 4 people. Everybody does that. We know that's the system. If you know that's the system, then you've got to know that you're not, at some point, the government has to step in because the private sector could no longer, in the year 2012, in every country in the world, that's why it's going on every place. You're having the issue here in Great Britain, we're having it in America. We are living in this fiction that the private sector can employ everybody. It can't, and it never again will be able to. As long as you have capitalism, you cannot have the private sector employ anyone. You will kill capitalism. You will have revolutions. You've got to have the government involved to supplement what the private sector can't pick up in employment. Otherwise, you're going to have all these people out of work. They're not going to get their jobs back. You go to the airport now, you can check in yourself with it on the screen. You don't even need the ticket agent. You call up for reservations, the person you're talking to is living in India. Every business is, if they can get away with having a computer replace a person, because the computer doesn't call in sick, the computer, at least in America, doesn't have to have the benefits, but God bless you. The church wouldn't say that. So, that's what I'm saying. It's a fiction. We've got to get away from this. Here's my point of view. But I think it's pretty hard to argue that the private sector will ever again employ all the people that need to be employed. And when politicians say the government never created a single job, which politicians in America are saying, that is absurd. Every single penny the government spends employs someone. Every single penny. Even if you're hiring a private firm to do the business, you're taking the tax dollar to pay the private firm to do the business. If you're using some of the money to pay the interest on the loan, it goes to the bank that then invests it, that gives the money out in the loan, so someone else gets hired. Every penny you spend in taxes hires someone. Yes, the goal should be to have as many people hired in the private sector as possible. That is the goal. But let's not lie to ourselves and think that we can just be anti-government, get the government out of the economy, let business do whatever it wants, no more regulation. And then on the other hand, you say, do everything you can to get a profit. But all they'll do is lay people off. How many want to know? She's better. I'm better.
I was just wondering, if your kids came up to you and said, Dad, I want to go on the Jerry Springer show, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, if kids did, I would panic because I only have one. I want to text. That wasn't me. No. I don't let, well, my daughter watched the show. Of course I will. But I tell my friends that. I never think, people that come on our show, I say, if you're coming on the show to have a problem solved, forget it. Our show is entertaining. You want to come and get something off your chest, hoot and howl about someone who did you wrong and all that fun. But I will never give the impression on the show, or tell people right out, if you need help, you go to a doctor, you go to a counselor. I'm a television personality. I am not a doctor. And I think television shows are wrong when they try to pretend, just because you got a contract to do a television show, don't pretend that you know how to solve this person's problem. That is cruel. You should not do that. No, I wouldn't go on the show with my family. I'll tell you one other story. I tell my family that I sell insurance. They don't even know I do insurance. I've been married for 38 years. My wife called about 3 years ago, in the middle of the show. Nikki calls and says to the producer calls me over and says, "Please, I'm on." And I go, "Oh my God," because I've been doing the show. She got calls during the show. Something okay, so I quickly stopped and went off stage. "Everything okay?" She says, "Oh my God." I said, "What?" She says, "She took off her blouse." I said, "What are you talking about?" She says, "I just saw your show. Is this what they're yelling about?" I've been doing the show for 18 years. Except for the first year when it was a serious show, she never had seen the show. The answer is no, I would not. No, I wouldn't let it go. Yeah.
From what I've heard here today, the passion seems to lie much more in politics than in the show. So is it now time to go full circle and stand for public office?
Well, what if the people heard what I said? No, I think about it all the time. I'm very active, I should tell you. I'm very active politically in the States. I spend a lot of time going around giving speeches, raising money, organizing. Whether I'd ever run again, I'm 68. By the time I got seniority, let's say I ran for Congress or the Senate, by the time I got seniority, I'd be in my 80s. I think that train pretty much has left the station. I'm never going to say I won't ever do it, because who knows what happens tomorrow. But it's not, there's no game plan. I don't think I need to, I'm not looking for a job. I believe strongly, and frankly, I think I have more people. The truth is, if I was a congressman, you wouldn't have come here tonight. There's a much larger audience because I get to be known by, it wasn't a plan, but I realized I'm never going to have this kind of audience nationwide in America, where, I get invited every place just because, for maybe different reasons, and they come expecting that I'm just going to talk about the show, and before you know it, we're talking politics. I can be much more effective doing that probably than just serving in a political office, which would be nice, but I wouldn't have any power with it. Like I said today, so probably not.
Schwarzenegger's Reagan.
You what?
Schwarzenegger, did it Reagan?
Yeah, what happened to him? Oh, Reagan. Yeah, but Schwarzenegger was younger. Is yes.
If the Queen was to appear on your show, what two questions would you like to ask?
If you're not happy with the choices, could I succeed you? I mean, I was born in England. I should be able to get Great question. And I don't want to say she couldn't be on the show. No, well, she could. I mean, she's the one in the family that probably couldn't be on the show. Actually, she can't, because you can't be on the show if you know. So that's the easy answer. We never have anyone who's known on the show. You're not allowed to be, So we never take. It's funny, we're called a tabloid show. In fact, we're not at all tabloid. We never out anyone who's known. You're allowed, when you come on our show, you can use a fake name. You can wear a disguise. So we're not out there. The people come on the show because they're fans of the show. It's probably one of the more exciting things that's happened to them in a long time. They're going on a national show. They get flown to, the studio from where they are, and they stay in a hotel. The producers are talking to them. It's kind of, so many of the people on our show, no one ever asks their opinion on anything. They're not in a relationship where their spouse or whatever asks them what do they think. The kids don't listen to them. Their parents don't listen to them. They don't have a job where they're asked their opinion. It's a different kind of a job. So it's kind of self-gratifying. You feel pretty good about yourself coming on the show. People are cheering you. They're booing the bad guy. It's not intended to be, but it ends up being a show, a little morality play every day. I mean, you watch our show, you know who the good guys are and you know who the bad guys. I don't care how old you are, even if you don't get what they're talking about, even if young people watch the show, there's a moral lesson. No one leaves that show not knowing what the proper behavior was and what the bad behavior was. Would the Queen be on the show? What would I ask? I'd say, what are you doing here?
Who's on the West this DJ? Can you give us your final thoughts?
Tricky. That's the way you get it in. Well, first of all, my final thought, which I do on every show, is a lie. And, the reason is because every day I'm back, the next day I'm back with another one, so it obviously wasn't the final thought. But why don't I end with a final thought? First of all, thank you very much for having me. That's awfully nice of you. And my final thought is, may you never be on my show.